The glass of champagne glittered under the ballroom lights, golden bubbles rising like tiny secrets waiting to burst. My daughter raised her glass high and leaned close to me, her smile glowing for the crowd. "Congratulations, Mom," she said. The words sounded sweet, yet something inside me tightened. She turned away before I could answer, her gown swirling as she joined her husband on the dance floor. Music swelled, and laughter echoed around me, but my fingers trembled as I lowered the glass toward my lips. That was when Mason, the young security guard, approached quietly and bent down. His voice was barely a whisper. "I saw your daughter pour something into your drink." The sound of his words froze the world around me. The chandelier seemed to tilt. My hand shook so badly I set the glass back on the table before it could spill. I stared at the golden liquid, its glow suddenly sinister, as though it knew something I did not. My heart pounded against my ribs, but I kept my face still. No one else could know. Not yet. "My name is Lydia Coleman. I am 68 years old, a mother, and until just a few weeks ago, a businesswoman who had spent 4 decades building a logistics company from nothing. Hours earlier, I had signed the papers that sold my company to Victor Sterling, a man who treated me with the kind of respect I rarely received from my own family. The price had been $63 million. Everyone here tonight celebrated that sale. They thought I was on the edge of a life of leisure, finally free. But at the very moment my daughter toasted me, I learned the truth that would change everything. Remember to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below if you want to hear more grandma life stories filled with emotion, betrayal, and unexpected strength. I pushed my chair back slightly, trying to slow my breathing. Across the room, Vanessa laughed, her hand on Ethan's arm as they moved together in the soft rhythm of the waltz. She looked radiant to the world, a dutiful daughter proud of her mother's success. Only I, and the young man who whispered to me, knew another story. My throat felt tight, but I reminded myself that panic was a luxury I could not afford. If what he said was true, then one wrong move could be the end of me. The champagne flute glimmered, mocking me. I thought of the years I had worked, the nights I had stayed awake wondering how I would pay the next shipment, the endless meetings with investors who doubted me. I built my company stone by stone, while raising Vanessa alone after her father's passing. Every victory, every contract, every sleepless night had been for her future. And now, on the night of my triumph, I was staring into a poisoned drink offered by my own child. I reached for my clutch and pretended to search for a tissue. Instead, I tipped the glass slightly, watching the liquid slide back and forth. My mind screamed to demand an explanation. But another part of me, older, wiser, forged in years of quiet struggle, held me back. I could not reveal my fear here, not in this crowded hall filled with partners, bankers, and strangers. No one could know what I suspected. Not yet. Mason remained at my side, shifting nervously. His eyes darted around the room, as if afraid someone might have seen him approach me. He looked young, barely older than my grandson would have been if I had one. His loyalty touched me, even though I barely knew him. "Thank you," I whispered without looking up. He nodded and stepped back, blending into the shadows as if he had never been there. I reached for the champagne once more, but instead of lifting it to my lips, I moved it toward the centerpiece on the table. Roses, lilies, and a crystal vase caught the ballroom lights. Slowly, carefully, I tilted the flute and let the golden liquid fall into the water below. It mixed with the petals, invisible now to anyone who glanced this way. I set the empty glass down and folded my hands in my lap, a picture of calm. Inside, however, my mind spun. The applause from the dance floor shook me back into the moment. Vanessa and Ethan bowed theatrically as though they were the stars of the evening, not me. My daughter's eyes flicked to my table, and for an instant I thought I saw a question there, a flicker of tension. Did she wonder if I had already drunk it? Did she expect me to falter? I met her gaze and smiled, thin and controlled. She smiled back, brighter, almost forced, before turning away. The evening stretched onward, but I was no longer part of it. Waiters moved with silver trays, clinking glasses filled the air, and Victor came by to shake my hand once more. He spoke warmly of the future, and promised that my company would be safe under his leadership. I nodded politely, my mind elsewhere. I could hardly hear his words over the echo inside me. My daughter, my own blood, might have tried to end me. I remembered her as a little girl with braids, running into my office after school, coloring quietly at my desk while I worked. I had thought those memories were treasures we both shared. Tonight they felt like ghosts mocking me, reminders of how far we had drifted apart. Somewhere along the way, my devotion had become a shadow she resented. I folded my napkin, rose from the table, and excused myself with a smile. No one questioned it. A woman my age is allowed to leave early. As I walked toward the exit, my heels clicking on the marble floor, I felt the weight of the night pressing down on me. Behind me, laughter swelled again, covering the silence of my departure. In the corridor outside the ballroom, I paused beneath a dim chandelier. My reflection in the gilded mirror looked pale, older than I had felt just hours ago when I signed those papers. I touched my face gently, then clenched my hand. This was not the end of my story. Whatever game my daughter and her husband were playing, I would not walk blindly into it. I had survived harder battles before. I would survive this. As the elevator doors closed around me, I breathed deeply, the first steady breath of the night. The golden drink was gone, but the danger remained. I knew one thing for certain. I could never look at my daughter the same way again. Now, with the night's celebration behind me and the echo of betrayal still ringing in my ears, I had to decide what my next move would be. When I left the hotel ballroom that night, the city lights outside looked different. They were bright and glittering, but to me they seemed sharp, like shards of glass cutting into the dark. My driver opened the car door, and I slipped inside, carrying with me the echo of Mason's whisper and the untouched glass of champagne still haunting my mind. I pressed the button on my clutch, feeling the tiny pill bottle I had tucked away. I had poured a little of the drink into it before leaving, pretending to dab my lips with a napkin. I knew I needed proof, not just suspicion. As the car rolled through the streets, my thoughts drifted back to the signing earlier that day. It had been the culmination of 40 years of struggle, late nights, and endless decisions that tested me to the bone. Victor Sterling, the buyer, had sat across from me at the long oak table. He was courteous, patient, and spoke with the kind of respect that made me remember who I was before all of this, before betrayal, before suspicion. He looked me in the eye as we shook hands, telling me he admired what I had built. In that moment, I had almost believed the future would be peaceful. The sale meant $63 million in my account. People around me congratulated me, telling me I could finally relax, travel, and enjoy my golden years. Yet as the contract closed, I had felt a hollow space inside me, a silence that money could not fill. Now that silence had turned into something sharper, fear. At home, I laid my purse on the counter and turned on the lamp. The soft yellow glow made the apartment feel smaller, less secure. I took the tiny bottle out and placed it on the table, staring at it as if it could answer me. If Mason had not spoken up, would I have lifted that glass? Would I already be lying on a cold floor somewhere while Vanessa wept crocodile tears for the cameras? I sat down, trying to slow my racing thoughts. My daughter had smiled so sweetly when she toasted me. I remembered the exact way her eyes shone, the way she touched my arm lightly, almost tender. How could that same hand have tipped something into my drink? The question dug deep into me, like claws. I knew I couldn't accuse her outright. That would end in denial, rage, and a family war I wasn't ready to ignite without proof. No, I had to move carefully. I opened the drawer and found a small box of old envelopes. Into one, I poured the rest of the champagne I had hidden in my clutch. The liquid soaked the paper almost instantly, but I sealed it tightly. It was clumsy, but it would be enough for a lab to test. The apartment felt too quiet, too still. I walked into the living room and looked at the framed photos on the shelf. Vanessa at 12, holding a trophy from her spelling bee. Vanessa at 18, smiling in her cap and gown. Us together at her wedding, me holding her hand while Ethan grinned at the camera. My throat tightened as I looked at each one. somewhere between those smiles and tonight's whisper from Mason, I had lost my daughter. Or maybe she had lost me. I went to the window and looked down at the street. Cars moved steadily, people hurried along the sidewalks, their lives untouched by mine. To them, I was a woman who had just sold her company for millions, lucky beyond measure. None of them would suspect that I was standing here questioning whether my only child had just tried to kill me. The thought should have broken me, but instead it steeled me. I remembered the early years, when banks refused me loans, when I had to beg suppliers to trust me, when I signed my house away as collateral just to keep the company afloat. I had survived by keeping calm, by planning, by never showing weakness. That woman, the fighter, still lived inside me. Tonight, she stirred awake. I carefully placed the envelope and the small bottle in a locked drawer in my desk. Tomorrow, I would take them to a private laboratory. If my suspicion was wrong, then I would apologize silently to Vanessa and bury the thought forever. But if it was right, then I needed to be ready. I poured myself a cup of tea, the steam rising in soft curls, and tried to steady my nerves. I thought again of Victor Sterling, the way he had told me, "You built something no one else could." His words reminded me that I wasn't just a mother, or a widow, or an old woman to be pitied. I was still the same Lydia who had built an empire out of sweat and stubbornness, and I would not let anyone, especially my own blood, strip that from me. The phone rang. I nearly dropped the cup. My hands shook as I reached for it, half expecting it to be Vanessa. But it was only Harriet, my old friend from the bank, calling to congratulate me again on the sale. Her warm voice carried through the line, and for a moment I almost told her everything. But no, not yet. Harriet was sharp and loyal, but even she could not be brought into this without evidence. I thanked her, told her I was fine, and hung up. The silence returned, heavier now. I sat back in my chair, clutching the phone, my mind racing. Vanessa's smile, Ethan's calculating eyes, Mason's whispered warning. They all spun around me, pieces of a puzzle I did not yet know how to solve. I went to bed that night, but found no rest. The sheets felt cold, and my body would not relax. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the champagne bubbling, rising, threatening. I imagined myself drinking it, my heart slowing, my breath stopping, while Vanessa leaned over me with false sorrow. I opened my eyes in the dark, promising myself I would never give her that chance. By morning, my decision was clear. The bottle and the soaked envelope were tucked safely into my bag. Today, I would find out what hid inside that golden drink. I brushed my hair, straightened my jacket, and looked at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were tired, but beneath the fatigue was steel. For 40 years I had been underestimated, dismissed, doubted. They all thought I was just a mother, just a woman nearing the end of her days. They were wrong. The following morning, I stepped out into the chill air with my bag clutched close to my side. Inside it were the envelope and the tiny bottle, the silent witnesses to what had almost happened to me. The city looked ordinary, people rushing with coffee cups in hand, unaware of the storm that had taken root in my life. I felt as though I was walking in two worlds at once, the familiar routine of a businesswoman who had just retired, and the darker path of a mother who now suspected her own daughter. My first stop was a discreet private laboratory. I knew the head technician there from years ago when my company handled medical shipments. He didn't ask many questions when I slid the envelope and bottle across the counter. "Run everything," I told him quietly, "and don't file it under my name. Just call me when you have the results." His eyes widened slightly, but he nodded. That small exchange reminded me that in business, as in life, the most valuable asset was trust built over years. From there, I walked into the lobby of a bank tower. Harriet Lowe had her office on the 22nd floor. She had been my colleague once, decades ago, before she rose through the ranks to become a senior director. Harriet had always been the kind of woman who spoke with authority, but carried warmth in her eyes. She had been there when my husband passed, sending flowers without fanfare. She had celebrated Vanessa's milestones with me. If there was one person I could rely on, it was her. "Lydia," she said as soon as I stepped into her office, her smile genuine. "I was hoping you'd stop by after the big sale." She gestured me to sit, then poured us both a glass of water. 63 million. You finally did it. I smiled faintly, though the number now felt like a curse. Yes, I did, but Harriet, I may need your help. I lowered my voice. I want my accounts reviewed. Every movement, every authorization. Quietly. No alerts to anyone else. Her brows furrowed, but she didn't question me. Of course, she said. Do you suspect something? I hesitated. Should I tell her everything? The champagne, Mason's warning, the way Vanessa's eyes had flickered? No, not yet. Let's just call it intuition, I said. Harriet had known me long enough to hear the truth in my tone. She nodded once, then tapped her keyboard, beginning the process. Leaving her office, I felt a small measure of strength return, but strength alone would not be enough. I needed a legal shield. That was when I called Sophia Grant. She was new to my world, a legal assistant barely in her 30s, but her resume had caught my eye when she applied for a part-time role after my sale. Her cover letter had been raw, describing how her own family had exploited her inheritance when she was younger. That kind of pain leaves a mark, one I recognized immediately. She met me in a cafe near the courthouse, tall, with a quiet confidence that belied her age. She carried a notebook and pen like armor. Mrs. Coleman, she said softly. You said it was urgent? I studied her for a moment. Please call me Lydia. And yes, it is. I need you to draft protections for me, powers of attorney, trusts, every safeguard you can think of. But I also want you to dig. Look into records, lawsuits, anything you can find on my son-in-law, Ethan Ward. She raised her brows, but didn't flinch. That won't be easy. Lawyers like him know how to bury their messes. I don't want easy, I replied. I want thorough. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. Then thorough is what you'll get. As I watched her jot notes, I felt a strange kinship with her. She understood betrayal. She carried it in her bones the same way I now did. That afternoon, I received my first piece of confirmation. Sophia called back, her voice hushed with urgency. I found something. Years ago, Ethan's father filed a complaint against him, elder financial abuse. It was settled quietly, dismissed before trial. But the record exists. He pressured his father to sign over property. It's the same pattern he's trying now. My chest tightened. So Mason's warning wasn't paranoia. It fit into a bigger pattern. My son-in-law had history. Vanessa had married into calculation and greed. I thanked her and hung up, gripping the phone until my knuckles whitened. The pain of knowing my daughter's choice cut deep, but the knowledge also sharpened my resolve. That evening, as I sat at my desk, I sifted through old contacts, wondering who else I could trust. One name stood out, Detective Marcus Hale. Years ago, when my company's servers were hacked, he had been the officer assigned. We had shared many long conversations, his steady presence keeping me calm during the storm. He had a reputation for honesty, rare in his line of work. If things escalated, he would be my anchor. I dialed his number. Marcus, I said when he answered. It's Lydia Coleman. Well, he replied warmly, I was just thinking of you when I read the news. Congratulations. Retirement at last. I hesitated before responding. Perhaps. Marcus, I may need your advice. Not officially, just as a friend. Someone may be trying to undermine me. His voice grew serious. Undermine how? Financially. Maybe more than that. I can't explain everything yet, but I need to know what protections I have if family is involved. There was silence on the line, then a steady reply. Lydia, you know I don't take sides in family matters, but if you have evidence, I'll stand by it. I'll make sure no one sweeps it under the rug. His words steadied me. That was all I needed for now, a reminder that truth could be defended. By nightfall, I had set the first bricks of my wall, Harriet at the bank, Sophia at the legal desk, Marcus on the law enforcement side. Each of them represented a different pillar of protection, financial, legal, and factual. My circle was small, but strong. Yet as I sat alone in my apartment, sipping tea in the dim light, I could not ignore the ache in my chest. This was my daughter I was guarding myself against. This was the girl I had raised, the child I had kissed goodnight. And now, in the shadows, she was my enemy. I closed my eyes, whispering to the silence, "Why, Vanessa?" But no answer came. The call came just after breakfast, when the morning sun was spilling through my window and the city outside was waking to another day. I stared at the phone for a long moment before answering, already knowing who it would be. Vanessa's name lit up on the screen. My thumb hovered over the green button, part of me wanting to let it ring, to protect myself with silence. But silence would only feed her suspicion. So I answered. "Hi, Mom," she said, her tone syrupy sweet. "How are you feeling after last night? It was such a beautiful party, wasn't it?" I forced my voice steady. "Yes, it was. Thank you for arranging the toast. You looked radiant." She laughed lightly, though I heard the edge beneath it. "Well, it was your night. You deserve to be celebrated. After all, you sold the company for such an incredible amount. 63 million. That must feel unreal." The way she lingered on the number sent a shiver through me. I pressed my fingers against the cool marble counter, grounding myself. "It's just a number," I replied calmly. "What matters is the work that built it." There was a pause on the line, subtle but telling. "Of course," she said finally. "But you don't have to keep carrying all that weight anymore. Ethan and I were talking, and we think it might be smart for you to set up a family trust, something that ensures the money is managed properly, so you don't have to worry about it. We could handle the details for you." Her words slid into the air like silk, but I heard the hooks beneath them. I let a quiet beat pass before answering. "That's thoughtful of you. I'll consider it." Vanessa's tone brightened instantly, as if my vague response was a victory. "Wonderful. Ethan's already drawn up some drafts we can show you. Nothing complicated, just a structure to keep everything organized." I kept my voice neutral. "That was fast." She chuckled, a little too quickly. "You know Ethan. He's always prepared." Prepared. The word lodged in my chest. Too prepared, perhaps. I imagined them late at night, whispering across their kitchen table, planning out how to ease me out of my own fortune. I swallowed the bitterness rising in my throat. "I'll be in touch," I said quietly. "I need time." "Of course, Mom," Vanessa replied smoothly. "Take all the time you need. We just want to help." When the call ended, I set the phone down carefully and stared at it, as though it were another glass of champagne, gleaming but dangerous. My daughter's voice had been warm, affectionate even, but her words were a mask. She had circled the money like a hawk, cloaking her hunger in the language of concern. I walked to my desk and opened the drawer where I had tucked away the papers Harriet had sent overnight. She had already found unusual activity, minor authorizations attempted on one of my accounts, small transfers that had been blocked but logged. None had succeeded, thanks to the safeguards already in place, but it was proof enough that someone was testing the gates, and Harriet had no doubt who stood behind those attempts. The phone buzzed again, this time a message from Ethan himself. His words were polished, lawyerly. "Good morning, Mrs. Coleman. I hope you are well. I've attached a few preliminary documents regarding the family trust we mentioned. Let's schedule a time to review them at your convenience. It's all in your best interest, of course." I opened the attachment with careful hands. My eyes scanned the lines. Legal language filled the page, smooth and convincing. But buried in the details was the truth. If I signed, I would relinquish authority over my estate. The trust would place Vanessa and Ethan as co-managers, with broad discretion. They had written me out of my own fortune with a smile. A tremor passed through me, not of fear, but of rage. I had spent a lifetime fighting for every inch of ground I stood on, and now my own daughter's husband thought he could reduce me to a signature, an obstacle to be managed away. Still, I forced myself to breathe. Anger was fire, and fire without control consumes everything. I would not let them see me burn. I would let them think I was naive, hesitant, perhaps even weak. I would let them believe their plan was working. I picked up my pen and wrote a simple reply. "Thank you, Ethan. I'll look it over. Perhaps we can meet later this week." Pressing send, I sat back in my chair and allowed myself a small, cold smile. They thought I was walking toward their net, but I was already weaving my own. The rest of the day passed in a haze of phone calls and quiet planning. Sophia stopped by in the afternoon, carrying a folder of her own. "I've gone through Ethan's history more carefully," she told me. "He's good at covering his tracks, but patterns leave shadows. Every case where his name comes up involves vulnerable clients, older relatives, widows, people without strong representation." She spread the papers across my desk. "And this draft he sent you? It's not just a trust. It's practically a transfer of power. If you had signed, you'd be locked out of decisions. He must think you won't notice the language buried in here." I traced the words with my fingertip, the letters blurring slightly. "He thinks I'm tired. He thinks I want to let go." I looked up at her, my voice steady. "But I'm not tired. Not yet." Sophia nodded, her eyes firm. "Then we'll keep building the wall around you." That night, I sat alone by the window, watching the city lights flicker. I remembered Vanessa as a child again, her head resting on my shoulder as I read her bedtime stories. She used to ask me what the endings meant, why heroes always faced betrayal before finding peace. I had told her it was because life tests us, and only through those tests do we find who we truly are. Now I wondered what test she thought she was giving me. Did she believe she could erase me with one signature? Did she think her false affection could blind me to the knife in her hand? I whispered into the quiet room, not for anyone else to hear. "You miscalculated, Vanessa. You forgot who taught you to fight." The city moved outside my window, unaware of the silent war beginning in my home. But I was ready. Inside a plain manila folder tucked into my bag, I had spent the night replaying Vanessa's voice, her silky words circling the idea of a trust, as though she were offering me comfort. But comfort doesn't come with prepared legal drafts waiting on the other end of a phone call. Comfort doesn't come laced with poison in a champagne glass. Comfort is what she had stolen from me. I arrived at the private laboratory as soon as their doors opened. The technician I had known for years took one look at me and said nothing, simply guiding me into a back office. I placed the folder on the desk between us, my fingers stiff from holding it so tightly. "Run a full toxicology," I said quietly. "Every test you have. I need to know what's inside." He nodded, his face unreadable, and promised to call within hours. Walking out into the morning light, I felt a strange relief. The waiting would be difficult, but at least the truth was moving closer. Back in my apartment, Sophia arrived shortly after with her notebook and laptop. Her dark hair was tied back, and she carried the focus of someone who had no intention of being intimidated by polished lawyers like Ethan. "I've been reviewing the drafts he sent you," she said, sliding her laptop onto my kitchen table. "The language is buried, but it's clear. If you signed, you'd lose control not only of the funds, but of your right to challenge future decisions. It's more than a trust. It's a trap." I leaned over the screen, reading the words again, this time with her explanations cutting through the fog. "They really believe I wouldn't notice," I murmured. Sophia's eyes softened. "Because they think you're tired. Because they think 68 means vulnerable." I looked at her, seeing in her face the same scars betrayal had carved into mine. "Then they've underestimated me." Before she could answer, my phone buzzed. It was the lab. I stepped into the other room, my heart hammering. The technician's voice was calm but heavy. "We found 2 substances. One is a sedative that causes confusion and memory loss. The other is a clotting agent. Combined with certain medications, it could trigger a stroke or worse. This wasn't an accident, Lydia. Someone meant to harm you." The words rang in my ears long after the call ended. My hand shook slightly as I set the phone down. Proof. Cold, scientific proof. When I returned to the kitchen, Sophia was watching me closely. "They found something, didn't they?" I nodded, my throat tight. "Yes, enough to end me." Sophia closed her notebook slowly. "Then we move forward carefully. This isn't just family drama anymore. It's a crime, but without visual proof, it's your word against theirs." As if summoned by fate, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Mason, the young security guard. His voice trembled slightly when I answered. "Mrs. Coleman? I wanted to let you know. I have a copy of the camera feed from last night. It shows your daughter leaning over your glass. I don't know if you need it, but I thought you should have it." My knees almost buckled. "Mason, you don't know what this means. Can you bring it to me?" "Yes, ma'am. Tonight, after my shift." I hung up, staring at the phone in disbelief. The universe had given me what I needed, not just the word of a witness, but a recording. That evening, Mason came by, dressed still in his uniform. He held out a small flash drive like it was something dangerous. "I shouldn't be giving you this," he said nervously, "but I saw what I saw. It didn't feel right to keep quiet." I placed my hand on his, steadying him. "You did the right thing." After he left, Sophia and I plugged the drive into her laptop. The footage was grainy, but clear enough. There was Vanessa, elegant in her gown, leaning over the table. Her hand hovered just above my glass for only a second, but in that second everything changed. Watching it, my chest tightened with both rage and sorrow. This was no longer suspicion. This was certainty. Sophia whispered, "This is undeniable." I pressed my palm against the table, grounding myself. "No, it's only the beginning. They won't give up because of this. They'll strike harder now, more desperate." I thought of Harriet at the bank, the failed attempts to move money. I thought of Ethan's careful wording, his calculated smile. If Vanessa had the heart to pour poison into her mother's drink, then she had the heart to push even further. And Ethan, with his history, would not hesitate to use the courts to his advantage. Later that night, I called Marcus. When he picked up, his voice was firm. "Lydia, what do you have for me?" I told him everything. The lab results, the footage, Mason's testimony. He exhaled slowly. "This is serious. If you want, we can open an investigation immediately." But I shook my head, even though he couldn't see me. "Not yet. I need to stay ahead of them. If we go public too soon, they'll paint me as paranoid, senile, or worse. I need to be prepared for their next move. Then I'll strike." Marcus's silence stretched before he answered. "You're playing a dangerous game, Lydia, but I'll be here when you're ready." I ended the call, standing by the window as the city lights flickered below. In my hands, I held proof of betrayal. Yet proof alone would not protect me. They would come again, and harder. I had to be ready to shield myself not just with evidence, but with strategy. For the first time in days, I felt the old fire inside me fully awake. The same fire that built a company against impossible odds. The same fire that raised a daughter alone. They thought they could snuff it out with a glass of champagne. When I unlocked the door to my apartment the next evening, I knew something was wrong. The light in the hallway seemed too sharp, the air too unsettled, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. I set my bag down gently and scanned the room. A drawer near my desk sat slightly ajar. I never left it that way. My stomach tightened. Vanessa had been here. I walked slowly through the apartment, my heels silent on the wooden floor. The framed photos on the shelf were exactly where I had left them, but the edges of one had been shifted a fraction of an inch, a detail only I would notice. She had looked at them, perhaps at her own younger face smiling from behind the glass. I felt a cold sadness sweep through me, knowing she had stood here in the silence, rifling through her mother's life as if it were nothing but evidence in a case. I opened the desk drawer wider and found the files disturbed. My will had been in there. The papers were stacked differently now, too neat, as if someone had read them and tried to disguise their curiosity. My hand brushed over the documents, and I knew I needed to move faster. The locks on my doors meant nothing if my daughter believed she had a right to everything I owned. The next morning, I called Harriet at the bank. She answered briskly, but I heard the concern in her tone when I explained what I had found. "Lydia, you need to lock down your accounts immediately. If she's already bold enough to enter your home, she's bold enough to attempt a transfer." Within hours, I was in her office, signing forms that froze my main accounts temporarily. Harriet leaned forward across the desk, her eyes sharp. "I also found something troubling. There was an attempted authorization last week, using what appeared to be your signature. It was flagged and stopped, but whoever tried it had access to details only someone close to you would know. I felt my breath catch. "You're telling me they've already tried to impersonate me?" She nodded grimly. "Yes, and the attempt was sophisticated. The signature was almost perfect, but the timing and location didn't match your usual activity." I sat back, the weight of betrayal pressing harder on my chest. So they're not just planning, they're acting. Harriet placed her hand over mine gently. "You've always been stronger than anyone gives you credit for. Don't let them convince you otherwise." Leaving the bank, I carried copies of the flagged attempt in my bag. My fingers brushed over the paper, the ink that pretended to be mine. It was like seeing my own ghost, a forgery meant to erase me. When I returned home, Sophia was waiting at my kitchen table, her laptop open, pages of notes scattered around. She looked up quickly. "I've been reviewing guardianship cases," she said. "It's a common tactic. Children claim their parents are unfit to manage their affairs, especially after a major financial change. If they file, it could strip you of control." Her words pierced me. "You think they would go that far?" She met my eyes without flinching. "Given what they've already done, I think it's not just possible. It's likely." I lowered myself into the chair across from her, the world narrowing around me. "Then we prepare." Sophia's eyes softened. "I also found something else. There was an email sent to one of your banks yesterday, attached with a power of attorney form. It had your name, but the signature was forged. If Harriet hadn't frozen the accounts, it might have gone through." The anger that had been simmering inside me rose, hot and steady. "They forged my name. They're not waiting for me to sign. They're taking what they want, regardless." Sophia leaned forward. "Which means we need to draft your new will immediately. One they can't touch or twist. And we need to put it under lock so secure they can't even breathe on it." By evening, we had sat with a trusted lawyer and rewritten the document. Every clause was tightened, every loophole sealed. My estate would flow into a foundation I would control until my last breath. Vanessa's access would not be automatic. She would have conditions. That night, alone again in my apartment, I changed the locks. The metallic click of the new key sliding home was a sound of defiance, a reminder to myself that I still held control. I walked through each room, reordering the photos, realigning the papers, reclaiming my space inch by inch. Yet beneath it all was the gnawing ache of betrayal, that my own daughter had turned my sanctuary into her hunting ground. As the city outside settled into its evening hum, I stood by the window and looked out at the skyline. I could almost see her face reflected in the glass, not the sweet smile of the girl who once rested against my shoulder, but the cold determination of a woman who saw me as an obstacle. The reflection blurred as my eyes filled, but I didn't let the tears fall. Not yet. I whispered into the night, steady and calm. "You will not win, Vanessa. You may know my signature, but you will never own my soul." The shadows of my apartment stretched long, wrapping around me like armor. I felt the fire in my chest burn stronger. I invited them to my apartment under the pretense of wanting to talk about the trust. My voice on the phone was even, polite, almost weary, and Vanessa seemed pleased at the suggestion. "Of course, Mom," she had said brightly. "We'll come by tonight. We'll bring dinner. You shouldn't be cooking at your age anyway." At my age, I let the comment pass. There would be no point in fighting her tone over the phone. Tonight, the fight would be in person. The evening fell quiet around my home. I set the table with calm precision, the clink of plates and glasses steadying my nerves. The air smelled faintly of lemon polish and the roses I had bought earlier, a small attempt to disguise the sharpness of the moment. As I lit the candles, I thought about the champagne glass at the hotel, the golden glow that had carried betrayal inside it. Tonight, I wanted no wine, no liquor. Only water sat in the glasses. When the knock came, I opened the door to find Vanessa smiling, carrying a basket of food. Ethan followed behind her, his tailored suit too perfect, his eyes already scanning the room like a man entering a courtroom. He set the basket down on the counter and gave me a lawyer's smile. It's good to see you, Lydia. I think tonight will clear up a lot of things. I returned his smile with one of my own, thin and steady. Yes, clarity is what I want too. We sat at the table, the three of us framed by candlelight. Vanessa began with small talk, her voice light, her hands moving gracefully as she served the dishes she had brought, but her eyes flicked to Ethan often, as if waiting for a signal. Finally, he reached into his briefcase and slid a folder across the table toward me. "These," he said smoothly, "are the trust documents we mentioned. We kept them simple to ease your mind. You don't need to worry about the details. We'll handle the administration. All you need to do is sign, and everything will be protected." I let my fingers rest on the folder but did not open it. "Protected from what?" I asked softly. Ethan's smile tightened. "From complications, from taxes, from people who might want to take advantage of you. And you think I can't manage that myself?" I kept my voice calm, almost curious. Vanessa leaned forward quickly, her eyes wide with feigned concern. "Mom, it's not like that. We just want to take some of the burden off you. You've carried everything for so long. Let us do something for you." I studied her face in the candlelight, the same face that had once pressed against my shoulder as she fell asleep during bedtime stories. Now that face was carefully composed, every smile rehearsed. "You think I'm burdened?" I asked. "You think I can't handle my own life?" Vanessa reached for my hand, but I pulled it back slowly. Her mask cracked just for a second, and I saw the flash of irritation in her eyes. Ethan cleared his throat, his voice still smooth. "Lydia, it's the sensible step. Courts often encourage these structures for someone at your stage in life. You've done enough. Let us handle the rest." I opened the folder finally, scanning the pages. The legal jargon rolled across the paper like a tide meant to drown me, but I had Sophia's explanations in my mind, each clause already exposed. My eyes lingered on the section that would strip me of decision-making authority. I closed the folder gently and folded my hands over it. "Tell me something, Ethan," I said, my tone calm. "If this trust is so protective, why does it remove my right to challenge your decisions? Why does it grant you power equal to mine, even greater if I disagree?" Ethan's eyes flickered, the first crack in his polished armor. "That's just standard language," he replied quickly. "Nothing unusual." "Unusual or not," I said, "it's unacceptable." Vanessa's voice sharpened, her sweetness thinning. "Mom, why are you making this so difficult? We're trying to help you. Do you really want to manage all of this alone until you die?" Her words cut deeper than she knew, but I did not flinch. "I have managed far worse than money, Vanessa. I managed to raise you alone. I managed to build a company from nothing. I think I can manage signing my own checks." Ethan leaned forward, his voice now carrying a hint of steel. "You need to think about the consequences of refusing. The courts look at these things. If someone were to argue you were unfit, these documents would be proof that you took responsible action. Without them, questions could arise." So there it was, the threat hidden in his polished words. My fingers tightened around the edge of the folder. "If someone were to argue I was unfit," I said slowly, "perhaps they should be more careful about forging my signature." Silence fell across the table. Vanessa's face went pale, her lips parting in shock. Ethan's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing. I hadn't meant to reveal what Harriet had shown me, but the words had slipped out, heavy and unshakable. Vanessa tried to recover first, her voice rising. "What are you talking about? We would never—" I cut her off with a steady hand raised between us. "I may be old, but I am not blind, and I am certainly not stupid." The candles flickered in the silence that followed. I could feel the fury radiating off Ethan, the fear barely contained in Vanessa's eyes. For the first time, I saw the partnership between them fully, his calculations, her desperation, and I understood that together they would stop at nothing. I rose slowly from the table, the folder still closed in my hand. "Dinner was lovely," I said evenly, "but I will not be signing anything tonight, or ever." Good evening." I walked to the door and opened it, waiting. Ethan stood, his movements stiff, his smile gone. Vanessa hesitated, her eyes glistening, as if part of her wanted to beg, but Ethan touched her arm and guided her out. When the door shut behind them, I leaned against it for a moment, my heart pounding. The apartment was quiet after they left, but the silence was no comfort. I walked slowly back to the table, staring at the folder they had tried to push into my hands. The pages inside still smelled faintly of ink and paper, but to me they carried the stench of betrayal. I slid the folder back into my desk drawer, locking it firmly, and pressed my palm against the cool wood. I had drawn my line tonight. They knew it, and I knew they would not stop here. The next morning my phone rang early. It was Marcus. His voice carried the steady calm I had come to depend on. "Lydia, I have something you need to see," he said. "The security guard Mason came to me. He brought footage from the hotel. I thought you'd want me to confirm it myself before handing it over." I met him at his office later that afternoon. The blinds were drawn and the faint hum of the city outside filtered into the room. He slid a flash drive across the desk toward me. "Watch it." With a deep breath, I leaned closer to the screen as he played the video. The ballroom came into view, golden light spilling across the tables, and there was my daughter. Vanessa leaned casually over my place setting, her gown brushing the chair, her hand tilting ever so slightly over my glass. In seconds, she was gone again, her smile bright as she turned back to Ethan. I gripped the edge of the desk, my nails digging into the wood. Even though I had already known, seeing it with my own eyes shattered something inside me. The little girl who once clung to my hand at night was gone, replaced by a woman whose hand could so easily slip poison into a glass. Marcus's voice was steady. "The lab confirmed the substances. With this video and Mason's statement, you have evidence strong enough for an arrest." I shook my head, my throat tight. "Not yet. If I go to the police now, she'll deny it. Ethan will spin it, drag me into court, and paint me as unstable. They'll say I imagined it, that I'm paranoid after the sale. They'll claim guardianship and try to strip everything from me. I need to stay one step ahead." Marcus studied me for a long moment. "Then you need to know what's coming." I did some digging. Ethan filed a preliminary inquiry with the court. He's preparing a petition for guardianship. They'll claim you can't manage your finances, that you're at risk of being manipulated by others. The words landed heavy in the air. "They want to erase me," I whispered. Marcus leaned forward. "I'll be clear, Lydia. If they move forward, it can get ugly. The court doesn't care about feelings. They care about paperwork, about signatures, about appearances. If Ethan plays this right, he can convince them you're vulnerable. That's why you need to shore up your defenses now. Legal, financial, personal, every angle." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the truth sink in. I had thought the poisoned glass was the worst betrayal. But this was deeper. They weren't just trying to end me quietly in a hotel ballroom. They wanted to take my life while leaving me breathing. They wanted to steal the years I had left, the dignity I had fought for, the independence I cherished. When I opened my eyes again, I felt something shift inside me. Grief hardened into resolve. "Then I'll fight them," I said firmly, "with every tool I have. They think I'm weak, but they've forgotten who taught them to stand." Marcus nodded, his expression unreadable. "I'll stand as a witness when you're ready. But remember, Lydia, the more evidence you gather, the stronger your hand will be." That night, back in my apartment, I sat with Sophia and Harriet. The three of us crowded around my table, papers spread across the surface. Harriet detailed the attempted transfers, her pen tapping against the blocked authorizations. Sophia outlined legal protections, her voice steady but urgent. "They'll argue you're unfit," Sophia said. "That's their weapon. But if we can show the forged documents, the video, the lab results, and Mason's testimony, we can not only defend you, we can turn the argument against them. It won't just be you on trial. It will be them." I listened, my hands folded in my lap, my heart beating steady. "Then that's what we'll do. We'll build a wall so high they can't scale it, and so solid they can't crack it." The room grew quiet for a moment, the three of us breathing in sync, each carrying a piece of the burden. Outside, the city lights glimmered, indifferent to my private war. But inside these walls, I felt something rare. Not just fear, but strength. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the skyline that had witnessed my life's work. "They think they can write me out of my own story," I said softly. "But they've forgotten that I am the one who holds the pen." Behind me, Harriet and Sophia exchanged a glance, and I knew they felt the shift too. The war was no longer hidden. It was open now, with sides drawn and weapons sharpened. The letter arrived on a gray Tuesday morning, tucked neatly into an envelope, with the county court seal stamped on the corner. I knew what it was before I even opened it. My hands were steady as I slid the paper free, though my heart felt like it was trying to escape my chest. The words blurred for a moment, but I forced myself to read every line. Petition for guardianship, filed by Vanessa Coleman and her husband, Ethan Ward. They were asking the court to declare me incapable of managing my own affairs. I sat down slowly at the kitchen table, the paper spread out before me. It felt heavier than it should have, as though the weight of betrayal had been poured into the ink itself. For all their smiles, all their polished words about helping me, this was their true intention, spelled out in legal terms. They weren't content with trying to end me quietly in a hotel ballroom. Now they wanted to erase me in the eyes of the law, strip me of my voice, my dignity, and everything I had worked for. Sophia arrived within the hour, her eyes widening as soon as she saw the letter. She read it silently, then set it down with trembling hands. "They didn't waste time," she said. "This is fast. Too fast. They must have been preparing for weeks." I nodded. "That's what frightens me the most. How long has my daughter been planning to bury me alive?" Harriet joined us later that afternoon, bringing her own files. She spread them across the table, her sharp eyes scanning each line. "They'll argue you're vulnerable," she said flatly. "But these," she pointed to the attempted transfers and the forged signature flagged by the bank, "tell a different story. If we present this carefully, we can show that the danger isn't you, it's them." Her words gave me strength, but I also knew Ethan would not fold easily. He was a lawyer. He knew how to twist facts until they bent his way. He would paint me as paranoid, fragile, perhaps even delusional. And Vanessa, my Vanessa, would sit beside him, nodding with false sorrow, pretending to care. The thought made my chest ache in a way that no toxin ever could. That evening, Harriet called me again. Her voice was tight. "Lydia, I found something else. A small transfer, $5,000, slipped through last month to an offshore account in the Caymans. It came from one of your secondary accounts. I had assumed it was a glitch, but paired with what we know now, it's a test. They were seeing if they could get away with it." I closed my eyes, the betrayal digging deeper. "So they've already stolen from me." "Not much, but enough to show intent," Harriet replied. "I've locked everything down now. They won't get another cent without clawing through fire." Later, Sophia and I sat in my living room, papers spread between us. She had drawn up counter-filings, documents to strengthen my case. "We'll argue not only that you're fully capable, but that they are the ones exploiting you," she explained. The video from the hotel, the toxicology report, Mason's testimony, Harriet's records. Together, it paints a clear picture. I nodded, feeling the burn of resolve. They wanted to prove I was unfit. Instead, they've given me the chance to prove they are unworthy. Still, the nights were hardest. I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, hearing Vanessa's laughter in my ears, remembering the way she used to braid her doll's hair while I worked late into the night. I had sacrificed so much for her, built an empire, not for myself, but for her future, and now she wanted to declare me incompetent. That was a wound deeper than any poison. The next day, I met with Marcus again. He listened carefully as I laid out everything. Harriet's discovery of the offshore transfer, Sophia's counterfilings, the petition for guardianship. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "They're playing a dangerous game," he said. "But the good news is they've made themselves vulnerable. Financial fraud, forgery, attempted poisoning. This isn't just family conflict anymore. These are crimes. If you decide to bring the hammer down, I'll stand beside you." His steady words anchored me. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt the faint stirrings of control. The betrayal was still raw, the wound still open, but I was no longer staggering in the dark. I had allies, I had proof, and I had the will to fight. That evening, as the city lights shimmered outside my window, I sat at my desk and wrote in my journal. The pen felt heavy in my hand, but the words flowed steady. They thought I would crumble. They thought I would surrender. But they've forgotten. I built an empire from dust, and I will build my defense from the ashes of their lies. I closed the journal and slipped it into the drawer beside my bed. It wasn't just for me. It was for the record, for the truth, for anyone who might one day ask how this battle began. The petition sat on my desk like a vulture, waiting for me to look away so it could swoop down and devour everything I had left. But instead of fear, I felt something else rising inside me. The sharp, steady rhythm of resolve. For decades, I had fought battles no one thought I could win. Contracts, shipments, investors, bankers who underestimated the widow with a small office and a stubborn will. This was no different. Only now the enemy bore my daughter's face. I gathered my allies around me that week. Harriet came first, carrying stacks of bank records sealed in folders. Her heels clicked across my hardwood floor as she entered, her expression fierce. She laid the papers down and looked me straight in the eye. Every attempted transfer, every forged authorization. I've documented it all. They thought they could be clever, but the trail is there if you know where to look. I placed my hand over hers. "You've saved me more than you know." She shook her head. "No, Lydia. You've saved yourself. I'm just making sure no one else forgets it." Later, Sophia arrived with a leather binder that looked too heavy for her small frame. She set it on the table and opened it with care. "This is your legal firewall," she explained, sliding page after page toward me. "A new foundation, registered under your control alone. The funds will be transferred here, safe from interference. The trust documents Ethan drafted won't matter if the assets are already protected." I scanned the pages, the language clear and airtight thanks to her meticulous work. "And if they try to challenge it?" I asked. Her eyes flashed with determination. "Then we fight them with their own tactics. We'll show the court not only that you're competent, but that you've taken every responsible step to secure your estate. You'll look like the model of prudence. They'll look like predators." As she spoke, I realized how far she had come in just a short time. She wasn't just an assistant anymore. She was my ally, my partner in this fight. I saw in her the younger version of myself, the woman who had once walked into boardrooms filled with men who doubted her and refused to leave without signing the deal. That evening, Marcus came by. He didn't carry folders or binders. Instead, he carried presence, the steady authority of law. He listened carefully as Harriet and Sophia laid out their work, then leaned back in his chair. "It's strong," he said, "very strong. Between the toxicology, the video, Mason's testimony, and the financial records, you have more than enough to counter their guardianship petition. But more than that, you have leverage. You can force them into a corner where their only choice is to reveal who they truly are." I nodded, the weight of his words sinking in. That's what I want. Not just to defend myself, to show the world what they've become. A messa. Together, the three of them formed a triangle around me. Harriet guarding the finances, Sophia the law, Marcus the truth. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel alone. The isolation that had haunted me since Mason whispered in my ear was lifting, replaced by the strength of this circle. We worked late into the night, drafting documents, reviewing strategy, preparing for every possible angle Ethan might take. When fatigue set in, I stepped into the kitchen and brewed tea for everyone. As I poured the steaming liquid into cups, I felt a sense of calm I hadn't known in months. This was my army, not with weapons, but with knowledge, loyalty, and truth. The next day, I signed the documents establishing the foundation. I chose a name that carried my late husband's memory, a quiet nod to the man who had believed in me when no one else did. The ink dried beneath my pen, and I felt the walls rise around me, not walls of isolation, but walls of protection. Sophia then slid another paper toward me, her expression careful. "This is a letter of wishes," she explained. "It outlines your intent for the foundation. It makes clear that any support for Vanessa is conditional. If she wants access to funds, she must commit to therapy. She must demonstrate genuine change. Otherwise, she receives nothing." I held the paper for a long time, my chest heavy. To put such conditions in writing for my only child was a wound of its own, yet I knew it was necessary. Love could not survive without truth, and truth demanded boundaries. Slowly, I signed my name at the bottom. When I finished, Harriet placed her hand over mine. "You've turned their weapon into your shield," she said softly. Marcus leaned forward, his voice low and steady. "And when the time comes, I'll be there to ensure no one can twist this against you." That night, as they all left, I stood by the door and watched them go. The apartment fell silent again, but it was a different kind of silence than before. Not the suffocating quiet of betrayal, but the steady calm of preparation. The battlefield was set. My allies were in place. I walked to the window and looked out over the city, the lights flickering like stars. For the first time in weeks, I felt a measure of peace. They had tried to break me, to declare me unfit. Instead, they had awakened a fire I thought had long gone cold. I wanted the meeting to happen on my terms. No more ambushes in my own home, no more phone calls dripping with manipulation. If they were going to face me again, it would be in a place I chose, under lights I controlled. So I called Vanessa, my voice calm, almost tired, as though I were yielding. "Let's have dinner together," I said. "At the hotel where we celebrated, just the three of us. I want to put this tension behind us." She didn't hesitate. "Of course, Mom," she replied, her voice a shade too bright. "Ethan and I will be there. I'm so glad you're ready to talk." When the call ended, I sat quietly at my desk, the line still humming in my ears. She believed me. That was good. Let her think I was surrendering. Let her think the mother she knew, the woman who once bent and sacrificed for her every need, was stepping back into that old role. She would never see what I had planned until it was too late. The evening arrived cold and crisp. The hotel's lobby gleamed under chandeliers, just as it had the night of the sale. I had requested a table near the tall windows, overlooking the city skyline. The staff knew me well enough not to question my request. As I waited, I placed 2 envelopes carefully in front of my plate, their edges aligned with precision. I ran my fingers over them briefly, steadying myself. Option A, option B. The clink of heels against marble made me look up. Vanessa walked in first, her gown deep emerald, her hair swept back as though she were attending a gala. Ethan followed, his suit impeccable, his expression measured. To the world, they were the perfect couple. Charming, successful, glowing with youth. To me, they were predators, circling closer. "Mom," Vanessa said warmly, leaning down to kiss my cheek. Her perfume was familiar, sharp and floral. "You look beautiful tonight." I smiled faintly. "Thank you. Sit down. Let's eat." The waiter poured water into our glasses, and for a moment the scene looked ordinary, even tender, but underneath, every movement carried weight. Vanessa's hand lingered on Ethan's arm. His eyes darted toward the envelopes on the table. He noticed. Dinner passed with shallow conversation, comments about the weather, the food, Victor Sterling's public praise of the company's transition. Vanessa laughed lightly, filling the air with her charm, but I saw the impatience behind her eyes. She wanted me to speak first. She wanted me to bend. Finally, she set her fork down and looked at me with practiced concern. "Mom, we've been so worried about you. The stress, the sale, everything that's been going on. We just want to make sure you're secure, that you don't have to carry this burden alone." Ethan leaned forward, his tone smooth. She's right, Lydia. We've already spoken with a few advisors. There are simple solutions. We just need your cooperation. Sign the trust, and all of this can be behind us. I lifted my glass of water and took a slow sip, letting the silence stretch. Then I set it down gently, the sound echoing louder than it should have. "Do you know what I see when I look at you two?" I asked softly. Vanessa blinked, her smile faltering. "What do you mean?" "I see the girl who once held my hand so tightly she was afraid to let go, and I see the man who promised to protect her, but instead taught her how to sharpen knives in the dark." Her lips parted, a flicker of unease crossing her face. Ethan shifted in his chair, but said nothing. I reached for the envelopes and placed them in the center of the table. Their edges caught the light, small but commanding. "These are for you," I said evenly. "Two paths. You will choose one tonight." Vanessa's hand trembled slightly as she touched the nearest envelope. "What is this?" "You'll find out soon," I replied. "But know this, I am not the helpless woman you think I am. Every step you've taken, every attempt you've made, I've seen it, and I've prepared for it." The waiter returned briefly to clear plates, sensing the tension but saying nothing. The music from the ballroom below drifted upward, faint but haunting. I felt the weight of the moment pressing down on us, the air thick with expectation. Ethan finally spoke, his voice low. "You're bluffing. You don't have anything." I met his eyes, steady as stone. "Then open the envelopes when the time comes, and see for yourself." Vanessa's face shifted between confusion and fear, her practiced confidence slipping. She looked at Ethan, but for once he offered her no comfort. I sat back, folding my hands in my lap. Tonight, the lies end. After this, there will be no more petitions, no more forged papers, no more poison in glasses. After tonight, you will know exactly where we stand. The city lights glittered behind them, casting their faces in gold and shadow. I thought of Mason, Harriet, Sophia, and Marcus, the allies who had stood with me, each one holding up a corner of my strength. I thought of the foundation papers signed, the accounts secured, the evidence waiting like ammunition. And I thought of my daughter, sitting across from me, her eyes filled with a fear she couldn't quite disguise. The envelopes rested between us like loaded weapons. The soft hum of the hotel's dining room faded into the background, every sound muffled by the pounding in my chest. Vanessa's fingers hovered just above the first envelope, trembling slightly before she pulled her hand back. Ethan's eyes narrowed, calculating, waiting for me to reveal my cards. I leaned forward, my voice calm but cutting through the air like glass. "You both believe you've cornered me. You think you've been clever, but you've underestimated me, just as so many others did before. And like them, you'll learn what that mistake costs." Ethan scoffed softly, forcing a smirk. "You've been under a lot of stress, Lydia. No one would fault you for being paranoid. These theatrics won't change the fact that the court will see reason. Guardianship is a responsible step." I slid the first envelope closer to him. "Then open this." He hesitated, then tore it open with practiced confidence. Inside was a set of documents, photocopies of the toxicology report from the private lab, detailing the substances found in my champagne. His smirk faltered. He flipped through the pages, his lips tightening as he realized exactly what they meant. I looked directly at Vanessa. "That drink you handed me, the one you so cheerfully toasted with, do you remember it?" Her face paled, her lips parting in protest. "I don't know what you're talking about." I didn't give her time. I gestured to Sophia, who stepped from the shadows of the room, holding a small laptop. With one click, the grainy footage from the hotel filled the screen. The camera caught Vanessa leaning over my glass, her hand lingering just long enough to drop something inside. Gasps rippled through the few diners nearby who had turned to watch. Vanessa's breath caught. This doesn't prove—" "It proves enough," I interrupted. "Enough for any judge to know exactly who is unfit. Not me. You." Ethan reached for the footage, his voice rising. "This could be anything. It's circumstantial. You can't—" Before he could finish, the doors to the dining room opened and Marcus walked in, his badge clipped discreetly to his belt. He carried the authority of truth itself, his presence shifting the air in the room. He approached the table and set down a signed statement from Mason, the guard. "Not circumstantial," Marcus said evenly. "Witness testimony, corroborated by lab results and recorded evidence." Ethan's face drained of color. For once, his words failed him. I slid the second envelope toward Vanessa, my voice softer now but edged with steel. "This one is your choice. Inside is a contract. Option A is prosecution, full charges, attempted poisoning, financial fraud, forged signatures, guardianship abuse. If I take it to court, you will lose everything. Your name, your career, your freedom." Vanessa's hands shook as she stared at the envelope, tears forming in her eyes. "Option B," I continued, "is conditional. You sign an agreement acknowledging my foundation as the sole manager of my estate. You agree to therapy. You cut ties with my finances forever. If you refuse, I will not hesitate to choose option A. Tonight is your last chance." For a long moment, silence filled the air. Vanessa looked at Ethan, but he no longer carried the mask of confidence. His jaw was tight, his eyes darting between Marcus, the laptop, and the papers on the table. He knew they were beaten. Vanessa's voice cracked. "Mom, how could you do this to me?" I felt the old ache in my chest, but I did not flinch. "How could you do this to me? I gave you everything, and you tried to take the only thing I had left, my dignity." Her tears spilled now, streaking down her cheeks as she gripped the envelope with trembling hands. She opened it slowly, eyes scanning the conditions written clearly inside. For the first time, her mask slipped entirely, revealing the frightened child I once knew. Ethan started to protest again, but Marcus's voice cut him down. "I suggest you stop talking, Mr. Ward. Any further attempt to manipulate will only strengthen the case against you." The room had gone quiet around us, the other diners pretending not to watch, but unable to look away. I let the silence stretch, my gaze fixed on my daughter. Finally, Vanessa whispered, "I'll do it. I'll sign." I nodded once, my voice steady. "Then sign now, in front of witnesses." Sophia slid a pen across the table. Vanessa's hand shook violently as she bent to the paper, her tears smudging the ink as she scrawled her name. The finality of the moment settled over us like a storm breaking. Ethan leaned back, his face pale, his career collapsing in the silence. Vanessa wept quietly, the mask of control gone. I sat taller, not with joy, but with the heavy calm of a woman who had fought and survived. I gathered the signed papers and slid them back into the envelope. "This ends tonight," I said softly. "There will be no more lies, no more schemes, only consequences." Vanessa looked at me through her tears, her voice barely audible. "You never understood me." My heart ached, but I answered evenly. "And you never understood me. But maybe with help, you can learn, if not for me, then for yourself." And the papers still lay between us, the ink from Vanessa's trembling signature not yet dry. I sat in silence, my hands folded neatly, while she cried softly across the table. Ethan's face had gone rigid, his jaw clenched so tightly that the veins in his neck stood out. For the first time since this began, he had nothing to say. The mask of the confident lawyer, the manipulator, had crumbled. Marcus collected the documents calmly, sliding them into a folder. His presence kept the room anchored, his badge a quiet reminder that truth had weight here. Sophia sat beside me, her eyes steady, her hand resting lightly near mine, as though to remind me I was not alone. Harriet had not been present, but I felt her strength and the safeguards she had built around me. My circle had held. Vanessa finally spoke, her voice hoarse. "I never wanted it to come to this." I met her eyes. "Then why did you let it?" Her tears spilled again. "Because I was tired of being second to you. Your company, your success, your name, everywhere I went, people saw Lydia Coleman's daughter, never Vanessa. I just wanted something of my own." The words cut, but they did not surprise me. I had sensed the resentment for years, hidden under forced smiles and distant phone calls. And so you chose to destroy me? To erase me from my own life? She shook her head weakly, her hands trembling in her lap. I didn't think it would go that far. Ethan said it was just a way to make sure everything was easier. Ethan finally snapped, his voice sharp. Stop talking, Vanessa. I turned on him, my voice low but firm. No, she will talk. For once, she will speak for herself instead of hiding behind you. Vanessa looked at him, then back at me, her face breaking. I was wrong, Mom. I see that now. I didn't know how to stop it once it started. Her words were raw, unpolished, and for a flicker of a moment, I saw the child I once knew. My heart twisted, but I kept my tone steady. You can't undo what you've done, but you can choose what you do next. Therapy isn't punishment. It's your only chance to find the part of yourself you've buried. She lowered her eyes, silent, as Ethan shifted beside her. He leaned back, his composure unraveling. This is absurd, he spat. You think a piece of paper and some crocodile tears change anything? You've ruined her. You've ruined me. Marcus's eyes hardened. No, Mr. Ward. You ruined yourself. You may not be in handcuffs tonight, but your reputation is gone. Any court, any board, any client who sees this will know what you are. Ethan glared at me, his voice dripping venom. You'll regret this, Lydia. I stood slowly, my chair scraping softly against the floor. I've regretted many things in my life. Loving you is not one of them, but trusting you was. He opened his mouth, but Vanessa reached out and touched his arm, her voice broken. Stop, Ethan, please. It's over. The room fell into silence. The waiter lingered in the distance, unsure whether to approach. The music from the ballroom played faintly, mocking in its cheer. I gathered my coat and nodded to Marcus and Sophia. We're done here. As I turned to leave, Vanessa's voice stopped me. Mom. I paused, my back still to her. Her voice cracked. Will you ever forgive me? I closed my eyes, the question slicing through me. Forgiveness was not something I could give lightly. Not after poison and betrayal, not after court petitions and forged signatures. Slowly, I turned back, my gaze steady. I don't know, but I hope one day you'll be someone I can forgive. Her shoulders sagged, her sobs quiet, but unrelenting. Ethan sat beside her, silent now, defeated. Outside the hotel, the night air was cold and sharp. I breathed deeply, each breath clearing the remnants of candle smoke and bitterness from my lungs. Sophia walked beside me, her step steady. You did it, she said softly. No, I replied, my voice calm. I survived it. There is a difference. She nodded, her eyes shining in the streetlights. You're stronger than anyone I've ever met. Marcus joined us, his hands tucked into his coat. The fallout will be ugly, he warned. Ethan will lose clients, Vanessa will be broken for a while, but you, Lydia, you'll walk out of this with your name intact. I looked up at the stars, faintly visible beyond the city's glow. Intact, maybe, but never the same. Back home, I set the signed documents carefully into my safe. I touched the cool metal, knowing it was more than paper. It was the line between my past and my future. I glanced at the photos on my shelf once again. Vanessa's smile stared back at me, frozen in time. I reached out and turned the frame face down. That night, I sat at my desk, pen in hand, and began to write her a letter. Not of forgiveness, not yet, but of possibility. I wrote of the conditions she had agreed to, of the therapy she must embrace, of the chance she still had to rebuild, not with my fortune, but with herself. My words were steady, honest, free of anger, but heavy with truth. When I finished, I sealed the letter in an envelope and set it aside. One day, when she was ready, she would read it. The following weeks unfolded like a long exhale after holding my breath for too long. The court petition was withdrawn, quietly and without spectacle, though whispers traveled quickly in certain circles. Ethan's law firm distanced themselves from him almost immediately, and I heard through Marcus that several of his long-term clients had already cut ties. For a man who had built his reputation on control, watching him lose it all was a justice sharper than any verdict. Vanessa kept her distance. She didn't call, not at first. A part of me expected silence forever, but another part knew her absence wasn't just defiance. It was shame. I let her be. The foundation paperwork was complete, the accounts secure, the signatures sealed. I had chosen its name carefully, tying it to my late husband's memory, a quiet tribute to the man who once stood beside me as I built a life brick by brick. Harriet stood next to me on the morning of the announcement, her voice clear and unwavering as she spoke to a small crowd of colleagues and press. She explained how the foundation would dedicate itself to supporting women who had faced exploitation, whether in business, in family, or in the hidden corners of their lives where silence had been forced upon them. I stood behind her, listening, my hands clasped in front of me. When she turned the microphone over to me, I stepped forward. The lights from the cameras were bright, but not blinding. I looked out at the faces before me and spoke the only truth that mattered. Respect, dignity, legacy. These are not words written in contracts. They are lived through choices. This foundation is not about me. It's about every woman who has been told she is too old, too weak, too silent. Tonight, we begin proving them wrong. Applause followed, polite at first, then rising into something warmer. I caught Sophia's eyes in the crowd, her expression glowing with quiet pride. She had stood with me through each step of this war, and in her, I saw the promise of a generation that would not bow as easily as mine once had been asked to. Later, as the guests mingled, Victor Sterling found me by the refreshment table. His handshake was firm, his eyes sincere. "You've handled all of this with a grace most couldn't dream of," he said. "It's rare to see someone walk through fire and come out steadier." I allowed myself a small smile. "Grace doesn't mean it didn't burn." He inclined his head. "Even so, you reminded everyone that dignity is not for sale." Those words carried me into the quiet of the evening. When the last guest had left, I returned to my apartment, where the soft glow of lamplight wrapped the rooms in calm. Sophia had stayed behind to help tidy up. She lingered at the window, looking out over the city. "You've given me more than a job, Lydia," she said when I joined her. "You've given me an example of how to stand when everyone else wants you to bow." Her words touched me deeper than I expected. I rested my hand gently on her shoulder. "And you've reminded me that even when the years weigh heavy, there are still people worth passing the torch to." That night, after she left, I poured myself a glass of water and sat at the kitchen table. The room was quiet, filled only with the faint hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the clock. I pulled out the framed photo of my family and studied it again. For the first time, I didn't feel the sharp sting of betrayal. Instead, I felt something else. Sorrow, yes, but also a strange kind of release. In my drawer rested the sealed letter I had written for Vanessa. I did not send it yet. Some words needed time. Some truths needed silence before they could be heard. A soft chime on my phone pulled me back. A message from Victor. "You protected your name. That deserves celebration. Simple, but powerful. Respect from someone who owed me nothing." It was a reminder that the world beyond my family saw me not as a burden, but as a woman who had stood her ground. The Foundation's first grants were approved that week. Harriet handled the paperwork with her usual precision, and Sophia reviewed applications late into the evening. When they showed me the final list of recipients, I felt a warmth that even betrayal could not dim. This was what I had fought for, not just money, not just survival, but the chance to leave behind something that could not be stolen. On Sunday afternoon, I walked to the small park near my home. The trees were heavy with leaves, their shades spilling across the benches. I sat beneath them, breathing in the quiet. The world outside moved on, children laughing, dogs tugging at their leashes, strangers passing without a glance. And yet in that ordinary moment, I felt extraordinary peace. I thought back to the glass of champagne, the golden surface that had once promised celebration, and nearly delivered death. That glass no longer haunted me. It had become a symbol of something else. The line I refused to cross, the dignity I refused to surrender. As the sun began to sink, I whispered a promise into the air. It ends with me. The lies, the manipulation, the betrayal, it ends here. The park had grown quieter as the sun dipped behind the trees, leaving streaks of amber across the sky. I walked home slowly, the cool air wrapping around me like a shawl. Inside, my apartment welcomed me with its familiar stillness. This place had witnessed my fear, my anger, my sorrow, and now it would hold my peace. I set my bag down and pulled the envelope from my desk drawer. The letter I had written to Vanessa days ago still rested inside, its edges neat, its weight heavier than the paper itself. I carried it to the table and sat down, running my hand over the seal. My words to her were simple but firm. You can still build something with me, just not out of me. I left the envelope on the counter, where I knew she would find it if she ever came. Part of me wondered if she would, if pride or shame would keep her away forever. But another part of me, quieter and softer, believed she might reach for it when the world grew too heavy. That night, I turned off the lights and let the glow of a single lamp fill the room. I brewed chamomile tea, the steam curling upward, and sat by the window. The city stretched out before me, alive with motion, but I felt no need to chase it anymore. My battles had been fought, my legacy secured. What remained was not victory in the way the world defined it, but survival, dignity, and choice. The Foundation's documents sat locked in my safe, untouchable by anyone but me. Harriet had called earlier, her voice bright with satisfaction as she told me the first recipients had already received notice. Sophia had texted, sending a photo of her late-night desk covered in files, her caption simple, "For every woman who thought she had no chance." And Marcus, steady, unyielding Marcus, had stopped by briefly, leaving behind a simple note. "You chose justice without bitterness. That is rare. Hold on to it." I looked at these people, these allies who had stood with me, and felt gratitude so sharp it brought tears. In their strength, I had found my own again. They reminded me that no woman, no matter her age, was ever truly alone if she dared to reach for help. My phone buzzed against the table. A message. I picked it up, expecting another update from Harriet or Sophia. But it wasn't. It was Vanessa. Her words were short, hesitant. "We started therapy." I stared at the screen, my breath catching. 3 small words, and yet they carried the weight of a mountain. My hand trembled as I set the phone down. I didn't reply, not yet. I needed to let those words sit, to decide what they meant, if anything. But for the first time in so long, hope crept into the cracks of my heart. I walked to the shelf and lifted the frame I had turned face down weeks before. Vanessa's young smile stared back at me, her arms wrapped around my waist in a photo from years ago. I brushed the dust from the glass, my thumb lingering over her face. "Maybe," I whispered, "you can find your way back." Later, I carried my tea to the park again, sitting beneath the nameless trees whose branches stretched like arms into the night. Their shade had always been a comfort to me, a reminder that strength could be silent, rooted deep where no eye could see. As I sat there, I thought of the golden champagne glass, the one that had begun all of this. Once it had symbolized betrayal. Tonight it symbolized endurance. I had not drunk it. I had walked away. And in walking away, I had written a new ending. Life would never return to what it had been. My daughter's betrayal had carved scars that time would not erase. But I had chosen not to let those scars define me. Instead, I would let them remind me of what I had survived, of what I had built, of what I had refused to surrender. The air grew cooler, the stars faint but steady above. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. My story was not finished, but this chapter had closed. My enemies had been unmasked, my allies had stood firm, and I had found dignity, not in defeating others, but in refusing to be defeated myself. When I rose to leave, I left the park with lighter steps. At home, the envelope for Vanessa remained on the counter, waiting. Perhaps one day she would open it. Perhaps one day she would understand. For now, it was enough to know that I had faced the darkness, and I had not bowed. Quiet strength, quiet survival, quiet triumph. That was my legacy.